Welcome to 1850 Main Street, a place where friends get together and talk about their country and hope for a brighter future. Your hosts have built this spot over the past 40 years, meeting every day with people who are in the headlines and behind the real stories. Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
Today, we're wrapping up our conversation about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, processing everything we learned from our interview with David Mosura, and asking what happens next.
Great thing about conversations at 1850 Main Street is we just start. And so we've got this whole gigantic package of information and experiences that have come through our shop at the American Policy Roundtable and at the Public Square. And because we are all engaged in a mission work of public policy in America, it's what we do, it's what we've been doing for a lifetime. When something like an event that is history unfolds right in front of you, I mean, to talk about phones blowing up, that's an understatement. So in trying to gather and curate all this data, we're always looking for what is the way that we can communicate with people in a way that's different than the endless repeating that they hear on cable and particularly on cable news, but then on talk radio as well. So being on the ground, it gives us a great advantage. And so, Rob, tell us your thoughts after having this conversation with David for a couple of sessions. What's the takeaway you felt?
Well, the takeaway was I was appreciative to hear the perspective of someone that was on the ground, someone that was a few rows behind the president who has law enforcement training, veteran, and to hear their perspective and understanding. And I flash back to when it was happening, when it initially happened and we got word of it. I was in a home with 34 other people. And let's see, there'd be roughly 18 of those people under the age of 21. And so everyone's watching, everyone's talking about it. But, I think of my daughter who's 12, and I kind of had to view it through those eyes for the evening because of the amount of questions that she was asking. Like, you're 12 years old. You've never experienced this or seen this. Is this going to be the new normal? What is this? Why would someone do this? She's getting to that age where it's the understanding and recognition that there is evil in this world. And we try and shield our kids from that as best we can while warning them from a young age that there's evil out there. So my night was spent like that. And then obviously when the text messages started going through and we realized that David Mosura was right there and we're like, hey, look at the bucket hat. We all know who that is. And so that's how we viewed it for the evening. And there were a lot of text messages and exchanges back and forth.
Dunk, it was a Saturday night. You guys were out walking the dog, I'm guessing.
That's exactly where we were.
Ha, got it.
When you just said that, I thought, did I tell you that? I didn't tell you that.
I do observe.
That is precisely where we were. It was
surveillance cameras and all stuff.
That's a little creepy. You're tracking my phone. He's tracking us, Rob. I thought we were against the circle technologies. No, I was walking the dog with my 13-year-old, my 9-year-old, and it was interesting because I had left my phone back at the house. Sometimes we just want to leave the tech. Ethan had his phone on him, just in case Joanna needed to get a hold of us for any reason. We'd actually been remarking. We don't live in a very super affluent area or anything. It's kind of a lower middle class neighborhoods that we walk in, and we were noting there were a lot of just Trump signs and bumper stickers and things. We were just kind of counting them, comparing them to other yard signs we saw, and I had said we were talking about Trump at the time. And I said, wow, if there's this many Trump signs around this area, I think he might have a chance. Not saying pro or con, I'm just observing what I thought. Right as I said that, my wife called his phone and she said, there's pictures of Trump bloody on the internet going around. She goes, I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this is fake, but you should see this. And so we got home as fast as we could and started checking news sources, and I'm texting Rob. And so it was just very remarkable that we were just talking about him. The other thing that was interesting, I had just watched the weekend before. Dave, you were passing around the film The Divine Plan. Mm-hmm. which is a movie about Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan and their relationship during the Cold War and kind of how they helped to facilitate its end, the end of the Soviet Union in many ways. The assassination of attempts of both of those men feature prominently at the beginning of that movie. And I watched that with my kids. They were very intrigued by that, just the human drama of an assassination.
Yeah, you
attempt.
told me it was quite upsetting to them also.
It was, yes. Caleb was crying. We then stopped the movie and looked at photographs and newsreel footage of those attempts, and they were very engaged with it. So then for this to happen the next weekend,
wow.
From their perspective, Ethan kept looking at me saying, we're living through history right now. It just put everything in perspective to them that this is the real world, but this is something that they're going to talk to their kids about, where they were, what they were doing. And then all of those iconic photos that have come out from that day. The Associated Press photographers, everyone has cell phones now. I mean, these are some of those photographs look like Rembrandt paintings or Renaissance paintings, just some unbelievable imagery that's coming out from that day. Just very historic.
Wow, we could go so many directions with that.
And that's how we saw the images as well, as the guy on the roof were from cell phone people that were there that saw him. We've seen so much of that spill out. It's interesting you mentioned yard signs, Dunk. How many times do you start a text message to someone and then you don't finish it? I'd actually started a text message to Dave that day. I never ended up sending it, probably because my wife was yelling at me for driving while texting. But we were traveling in the South the Saturday it happened, and we observed, we stopped counting at about 80-some Trump signs, 0 Biden signs. And it was that many for Trump, and then there were 2 for Dale Earnhardt. So we'd seen. So the point being is Dale Earnhardt signs are a lot more prevalent than the Biden signs, and we took notice of that as well, more than we've ever seen in the past. And I was like, wow, that I don't know what that means, what that says, but they're out there and they're prevalent. So taking notice.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
Well, we have a tradition here that we don't tell people who to vote for, and we don't tell people who we're voting for. And obviously, we're into campaign season big time now. We're into the convention season, and this historic event is beyond any kind of October surprise that any orchestrated effort would do. And so people are trying to figure out, what does that do as far as shaking up everything that was happening before? One casual observation from the Democrat point of view is that I heard one consultant say the other day, well, at least we're not talking about Joe Biden leaving the ticket anymore. And so it was sort of like, well, that certainly got that subject off the table, which I think is quite interesting. Now, whether that will come back or not, who knows?
Well, I couldn't help but notice. It did do that, but I can't help but notice every time Biden came out and made a brief statement, which were, you could break them down. It was what he did, what he kind of had to do.
Sure.
But you would go from Trump standing up, chanting with the crowd chanting USA, he's got a bloodied face, and then you have Biden in a room with curtains behind him. The sheer optics of that seemed bad for Biden every time he opened his mouth.
Yeah, I said to somebody the other day, in the last couple of weeks, if it wasn't for bad luck, Joe Biden had no luck at all. I mean, as far as a campaign goes. But in any case, this is much bigger than that. Because if, in fact, these two people reach the ballot, we want to be careful to remind folks that they only get 48 months. So that's a big deal. All right. It's going to be a lot more about what happens in the House and the Senate. We're talking about Trump signs, we're counting, but we're not going to play the game of trying to push or nudge or any of that stuff. People vote for who they're going to vote for. And as much as it seems like this issue is going to be the dominant reality, it may be the biggest momentum swing. But 6 weeks from now, a lot of people will largely have sort of lost touch with what just happened.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will be asking, how does this impact the races further down the ticket? What does that look like? I know there's a lot of people that care in all 50 states, and especially in the United States Senate races and some of those key races, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Montana, and a few others.
So I will tell you, talking about the pictures, I've got one that sticks in my mind. The others, are I know they're going to be exploited. And so I tend to not, I recognize the first off, the extraordinary work of the photographers at risk of their lives.
Yes. Yeah. As somebody who shoots video,
we've been there.
You want to think, what would I do in this situation? They were very professional, did their job.
They did their job. And one of them, I can only imagine how, one of them managed to get their camera on floor level of the platform on which the president was standing. And you have the shot of Donald Trump's face while he's flat on the ground. And it's the face of a man who's in shock.
Yeah. You've got the blood trickling down,
now,
the sunlight beaming through.
The man that would rise up in just a few minutes looks different. But in that moment, I'm guessing that Donald Trump is going through what every one of us would go through, which is a personal inventory of pieces and parts. Do my hands work? Do my feet work? Am I bleeding anywhere other than, and am I okay? Can I touch this and not put a hole in my head? Am I going to die here? You got to think, this is freaky stuff. All right. And so you see that moment, that totally human moment where you're wondering what went through his mind.
Yes, because we know how much preparation goes into moments like that. We know the training that he's received from the Secret Service. We know they do drills and they talk about, hey, if this happens, this is what you need to do. Are you really ready for the real thing, regardless of all the training and practice you do? When it's go time, it's go time.
Yeah, how much of it is instinct and how much of it is reflection? And then, of course, the question of the reflection, because you mentioned the assassination attempts on Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan. Both those periods of recovery created a great amount of reflection from two men who were confessedly Christian, and one quite obviously, all right? And yet, even at the level of where Pope John Paul was, he felt that the realization, well, he put it this way, he said, one hand directed the gun, but another hand directed the bullets. Both these men came away with a deeper sense of spiritual responsibility for the time that they had left. And that movie, The Divine Plan, which I'd recommend everyone view, keep it with older children though.
Yeah, my guys got a little bored with the politics at the back end.
Yeah,
but
yeah, keep it for the older kids. But it's a great film. And it shows how these two men in the last years of their lives were used dramatically to see the liberation of Europe from communism and the fall of the Soviet Empire. God used them mightily. And so you'd have to say, well, surely he spared their lives because then they were used mightily. Well, that's the amazing thing about providence is we don't know all the pieces and parts. So did he permit this to happen so that they would have the deeper commitment, so that they would be available for the opportunity that God knew was coming? You don't know. That's the cool thing about providence, okay? It does require faith. You don't see all the pieces and all the parts. But in retrospect, you can see, my goodness, what would have happened if? So I guess the big question is that I pray about is I hope that 5 years from now, when people are able to process the grief of the family that suffered such loss and the others that are still, hopefully they'll be fully recovered and back to some level of normalcy in their lives, we'll look back and see the good that came out of this in spite of the evil that began it all.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.